Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and today we're going to be doing our final mock draft of the 2024 offseason. We've done a lot of these. I've done a lot more than maybe what's been on the YouTube channel, that's for sure. But it's really time, guys. Like we are currently, at least at the time of recording this, I'm 2 days away. For you guys, it's going to be one or less, so you're watching this after the draft has actually happened. Lucky you if that's the case. But we're at that point. Like, my big board is pretty much finalized. I made some of my last changes today, and I'm ready for this thing to happen. So I'm going to give you guys my final thoughts, give you kind of a rundown. Maybe some of the players I'm looking at, like what order I'm looking at prospects in as well. And then, like, maybe what player do I consider moving back if there's not better options available. Just kind of a game plan for the first round is what we want to do here. So let's take a look at my big board. These are hopefully the final rankings. I reserve the right to change things as I always do. I will have until 7 o'clock Central Time on Thursday to do that. But my top guy to obviously talk about here is Malik Neighbors. I mentioned him on the video the other day talking about who I would take in the first round if I could have it my way. And I obviously understand that this requires a trade. It requires you to have the trade partner that wants to move with you. But I think that is the best case scenario for the Jaguars to go up and make a move for that kind of player. I'm not going to force it in this video because we have done that in the past. We've made big trade for him. So maybe we'll do something different. But if he does fall to a certain point, he's definitely a player we'll be considering. You've also got Rome Odunze, who should not be forgotten about when we're talking about Malik Neighbors, because Odunze, I think, is like probably 95% of everything that Malik Neighbors is. My point in saying that is he is a very good player. He is a blue chip prospect from this class. He's going to be around the NFL for a long time. And whatever team gets him is going to be thrilled to have him as a part of their organization. He's not a consolation prize. You know, talking about these wide receivers. These guys are incredible players who all are going to offer something maybe a little bit different from each other. But I do think Odunze, well, he might not be as complimentary as what Malik Neighbors would be to the team. I think he's going to be a wide receiver one right off the bat. I think he's going to bring a different skill set well enough for this team. And he's going to be a hell of an addition if he comes to Jacksonville. So he is our second guy that we're looking at in the first round. So those are the receivers I would realistically take there. Talking about the other guys, I think I just have them too low on my big board to where there would be a scenario where I would be taking them in the first round. Just realistically. And this is what I would do. These are my thoughts. And so that's kind of where it ends for me with wide receiver. It's sort of go big or go home. You know, and maybe you get someone day 2. In the third round, that's also a possibility. We'll see what happens, of course. But that's kind of my thought on the receiver position, which is ideally the direction you're able to go on draft day. I think it's the most impactful that you could have. You've also got Joe Alt here. I think he's going to be gone before any pick we would ever consider moving up for him at. And this is a very deep tackle class, so I think with where he's going to go, it's probably not worth it for Jacksonville. The guy I do think would be is Olu Fashanu. I think there's a chance that Fashanu could even fall to 17, but I do think he makes it around to New Orleans picks, goes around there in, 14, 13, one of those teams there. And so that might be a player that you look to make a small trade up for. You've also got Johnny Newton. I think he will be available at 17, barring perhaps Chicago moving down and selecting him, because I do think that's a team that would be very high on him. It depends what they do, but it would make sense for Chicago. If they want to move, let's throw out an example, maybe with the Colts, right? The Colts want to move up and get Bowers before the Jets, and the Bears want more picks. They move back to 15 and they take Johnny Newton. That is absolutely a scenario that could play out on draft day. So that could be something to potentially watch. But I think that Johnny Newton, if he's there at 17, he'd be a hell of a pick. And there is a role for him to play with this team because, well, you need a rotation. on that defensive line. To me right now, there are not a lot of rotational pieces. And especially like when we're talking about the interior of the defensive line, that third guy isn't even really a rotational guy. It's someone who's still going to play a lot of snaps because these are 300 plus pound players who are on the field. They are not going to be out there for 1,000 plus snaps every year. It's just not going to happen. Plus, you have injury concerns for both of them. So, Johnny Newton, well, you can say technically the depth chart says that he's in, the second string group. He's still going to be a starter for this team. So that would be my argument there. You've also got some other fun directions you could go. I think Dallas Turner, he'd probably be my top option of the pass rushers. You could also throw in Jared Verse. Both of them are very close. I would probably just bank on the upside of Dallas Turner, especially putting him in a system where he's going to be around some very good players who can coach him up. And then Quinyon Mitchell, he is the CB1 for me, and he is very firmly the CB1 at this point. When I go back and rewatch things, I think it's very clear. You look at everything he's done over this offseason, his whole body of work. This is a position that Quinyon Mitchell has earned for me. So I really do like him. He's a top 10 prospect. He's probably going to be a home run pick for whatever team takes him. And then you got Jared Verse, who we talked about. Talise Fuanga leads some of our offensive linemen here. I think he's going to be a guard at his best in the NFL. I don't know if that's eventually where he ends up, but I do think that's the ideal situation. And I don't know if Jacksonville would actually treat it that way. I think if they brought him in, they'd probably say you're the right tackle and then perhaps move on from Cam Robinson. But ideally, I would want Fuanga to be the right guard of the future. You've also got Fatanu, who I think could really just play wherever you'd like him to. I think he's going to be a very good offensive lineman, and I think he'd fit this scheme very well. And then probably the final name that I would take at 17 if the team is going to stay put is going to be Terrion Arnold. I don't think he's a consolation prize in saying that. I think he's a very good player. I think he's someone who'd fit perfectly in Jacksonville as well. Would be really excited if he was a player down south in Duval, but we'll have to see what happens, of course. I do think there are plenty of options that could be better. Nevertheless, these guys are all top 15 prospects for me. So that's kind of your look at what my top options are. And maybe there's a world where we kind of change our approach and maybe take someone who's ranked a little bit lower. I'll give you an example. Maybe if Quinyon Mitchell is sitting there on the board and you got Johnny Newton available as well, you might want to take Mitchell. Like, I could understand why someone would do that. It's debatable, of course. I think I would probably mostly stick to my board. But some of these players are very close for me. And Quinyon Mitchell is a borderline blue chip prospect who I didn't put in that tier. Well, Johnny Newton, he is just barely in that blue chip prospect tier for me. So you could definitely make some arguments. But with this all said, we are just going to go ahead. We're going to jump into this thing. Going to take it a few picks at a time in the first round. So we'll get past Tennessee's pick. We'll see if wide receivers are still sitting there. If they are, I would expect this to make a trade up. So we've got Joe Wald off the board. Okay, there is going to be a wide receiver here. So not really realistic in how this is going to go. You could flip these picks. Potentially that actually happens. We have McCarthy off to the Giants, Malik Neighbors to the Titans. I think this is a very real possibility. I've talked about that before on the channel. I definitely think that could take place. Now, here at pick 8, if there weren't any teams who were going to trade up, maybe you wouldn't have to move up to pick 8. But I do think that someone at the end of the day is going to be at least calling about this pick. And there's a lot of reasons for the Falcons to trade back to. So we're going to make something happen here. We are going to get Rome Odunze in Jacksonville and send him an offer that they can't refuse. So what does this look like? You look at Draft Tech here, or trade value chart. 1,400 points is what pick 8 is worth. The combined total of 17 and 48 is 1,370. So we're 30 points short. I think you can get that done probably with one of these picks here. we'll go with 114 in this scenario. We'll send that over to the Falcons. I think that would be fine. I think they would accept that. And if they don't, maybe you're throwing in 96, or if you want to keep that day 2 pick, you're throwing in a future third. There's a lot of other ways you might be able to go here. For the sake of this, we're going to do this as our deal. We are overpaying a little bit, so I think it would get done. So now we're sitting up here. We've got what is ultimately my number 5 prospect on the board. And if you take out the quarterbacks, this is the third guy. Because, well, you're not drafting a quarterback, right? Rome Odunze is going to be the pick here. He is a phenomenal possession receiver down the field. Also a very good route runner. I think he has a very complete game. I don't think he is necessarily perfect in every way. I think he's definitely less of an athlete than maybe what Malik Neighbors is. But I do think that he offers a lot. I think he's going to be someone that Trevor Lawrence could throw to down the field consistently and start making some of these big plays happen in Jacksonville that just haven't been happening for a while. Now, given that we traded up, I'm not looking to trade up here in the third round, probably regardless of who the player is. I'm going to assume that no one insane falls. But with what we gave up, we probably got to stay put, consider trading back, try to take deals on players that are available. So we get down here to pick 96, and we got a few options. So I would say the top guy on my board is definitely going to be Michael Hall Jr. He's had a very interesting offseason because he went from being this super undersized guy to people's perceptions to all of a sudden, the measurements are good. Like he's matching, for example, Chris Jenkins Jr., who is my 3rd overall interior defensive lineman, and he's looked at as a 2nd round pick right now. He ended up matching him, and he ended up putting on a lot of weight. So he's had a transformation this offseason to be able to maybe be a better run defender. We'll have to see what he is at the next level. But I do say, like Michael Hall Jr., he is a young player. He's 20 at the time he's being picked. He's going into a situation where he can develop behind Eric Armstead, Devon Hamilton, even throwing guys like Roy Robertson Harris. You could even put in Tyler Lacey. Like it's a very full room as far as veteran presences. Tyler Lacey won't count to that, of course, but I think it's a good situation for Michael Hall Jr., and he would be the top player for me at this point, and it would be a position of need. You also could talk about, if you go pretty far down the board, I like Jarvis Brownlee Jr. I think he's more of a slot cornerback. He even said it himself. You could look at someone like Cam Hart, who's usually somewhere around here. He might be gone already, which would be kind of shocking. I don't think he is. I think he's eluding me. I might have missed him going through the rankings. Okay, yeah, there he is. So, we obviously need a cornerback, ideally. So Cam Hart could be someone who could make a lot of sense. You also, if you want to consider maybe a different approach, Braylon Trice is sitting here. He's fallen down the board. He had some weight issues that ended up coming up. He came in at like 245, which is not ideal. And so there's some concerns about like how is he going to play at the next level, right? Because he came in way lighter than he was on film. That was a huge part of his game. He was a power player. That is a concern for sure. And so I don't have Braylon Trice super high anymore. He was seemingly like a fringe first rounder throughout most of this process. He is not anymore at this point. The other guy you could throw out, who he won't be the pick here, but he's someone that maybe if he's still sitting here at 116, I don't think he will be, but I do want to give some love to as a potential option, could be Michael Pratt. And I'm sure people are like, we just got Mac Jones. Like, why would we need a backup? Well, here's the thing. Mac Jones at the longest is going to be here probably 1 year. That's the realistic outcome. He could be gone at the trade deadline, for all we know. There could be a team that wants a quarterback that maybe saw, hey, it looks like he's doing better. Let me take him in and have him start on my team, because Mac Jones is going to go somewhere else at some point and play. Whether he's supposed to be the starter or not, There's going to be teams that get injuries. There's going to be a team that might want to go invest in him and give him an opportunity. That's very much possible. And so, considering the fact that it could even be earlier, why not take a shot on someone who could be a starter in the NFL in Michael Pratt, have that as your backup for 4 years, and know that, hey, like if something happens to Trevor Lawrence, we're not rolling out CJ Beathard anymore. We're rolling out a guy who can win. We're rolling out a guy who changes programs as well. I mean, that's what he did in Tulane. He's a very good quarterback. I think for like talking about this range in the NFL draft, I would definitely be watching him close if he's available around here. Now, there should be other teams take a shot on him. If I'm being honest, I don't think he should be available at 116. But if he's there, he is definitely someone we'll be taking a look at. But given my big board, which would ultimately have, at this pick, I would imagine Michael Hall is the top guy. Yeah, Cooper Beebe was the closest one. He just went before this. The next closest we're going to get is going to be pretty far down the board. So we're talking about, I think, oh man, yeah, we're really going far. Braylon Trice would be our next guy. So 2 guys that are here. Michael Hall Jr. I have a much higher grade on. I think he's going to be a good interior defensive lineman. Just give him a little bit of time. So you get a really nice player. You saw Trice went. You'll probably see Pratt goes here. See what happens. Okay. So we got a conversation. Because you got Michael Pratt available at 116. You've also got Cam Hart way down the board, who I think is a pretty good prospect. I have him ranked lower than Pratt. But given the fact that there is a major need at cornerback, even though I have Pratt higher, and I'd want to think you could take the best player, right? And you'd have a way of dealing with this other position. I don't know how many players I trust at this point. Because you're looking at this board, there's not a whole lot of people I want playing on the outside. I think maybe you could pivot to Nehemiah Pritchett. Of course, could I sit here and say, well, Cam Hart's ranked 156 here and we have 153? Yeah, I could, but it's just not how the draft works. Like, we cannot guarantee that stuff. And because of that, I have to take both into consideration. Well, I would realistically probably take Pratt, and I would make a trade for a cornerback or maybe add someone who's still available in free agency to help kind of shore up the room. In this scenario, given we are just doing the draft, Cam Hart is going to be our pick. We'll watch Pratt go off immediately after. That's what I would do there. So now with this draft, we've hit cornerback. We got someone who could actually be a pretty solid starter in Cam Hart. You've got a very good wide receiver. That room is complete now. You have another interior defensive lineman. You get to pick 153 here. I think you're looking to add to the offensive line. You got Christian Jones as an option who could be a swing tackle. You also got Zach Zinner that may not be as good of a scheme fit as what Christian Jones would be. But I do think he's a pretty solid prospect and a starting guard in the NFL. To have that kind of guy on a 4-year deal with pick 153, I think that would be good for Jacksonville to invest in that kind of prospect. You've got some other players you could consider. Javon Foster is another nice swing tackle they could bring in. Don't know if he's a starter, right? But looking at this board, I don't think there's any other clear options available. So in this situation, we're going to take our guard. We're going to make sure that we have someone ready. If Brandon Scherf goes down, if Ezra Cleveland goes down, either of those guys, Zach Zinner is a right guard coming out of college, so he'll have experience for the more likely of those players to get injured. And you keep in mind, Scherf is probably only going to be here one more year. I get Zinter isn't the perfect fit, and you can even see that when they give his analysis here, because they talk more about these gap schemes, and he does come from a very run-heavy offense. I do think you can make it work with Zinner, and I think you can survive with that situation. So I like it. you're getting a backup player, right? But you're getting someone can start at the next level. He has time to recover from this injury he had as well last season because he's not going to be starting right off the bat. So that is a good situation to have on the offensive line. You shore up, I think, what is another kind of underrated need. So we've got 2 picks left. We're not going to trade anymore at this point. We're just going to make our selections. And then, after the draft's over, you can go hog wild on the UDFAs. But at this point, Christian Boyd is still here. It's definitely a name I'm considering. You got Tanner McLaughlin as well. Both of those players aren't going to have a big role on their team. They're not going to be guys who come in and necessarily start, right? But I want to get someone that I think could have starter potential or might be a steal at this point. Now, another need that I think is going to triumph here is the fact that the Jaguars do not have a kicker to rely on. If I'm looking at this correctly, we have all the kickers still on the board. There is one guy that I think I would feel confident spending a pick on, which, picking a kicker is a crapshoot most of the time. It's why you're supposed to do it later in the draft, or you find a guy that's supposed to not bust and pray to God he doesn't, right? But Joshua Carty, I think he's someone who is both accurate and has a powerful leg. That's a really good combination. He was good in clutch moments in college. That's really all I'm looking at for a kicker. So you can go after some other guys. You could talk about Will Reichard, for example, and say hey, man, this guy has literally led every kicker, I think, in Alabama history as far as points scored. Well, at the same time, I have concerns about how powerful Reichard's leg is. While he is very accurate, that might be a problem for me because we want to get these guys who can maybe take those drives to get to the 45 or the 40-yard line and turn them into points consistently, which we just haven't been able to do. So Joshua Carty is going to be my pick at 212 for those reasons. Now, we'll get to 236 here. We'll see what's left. I have the feeling that we're going to lose both players here. We'll see. And we do not. Tanner McLaughlin's still here. I think that's going to be the selection for me. I like him a lot as a prospect. I don't think he's a blocking tight end for sure, but I think he's someone you could have go out there and receive some passes. So if you have an injury at tight end, I would feel much more confident about that room. I think you can get a role for him at the next level. And like I said, I think in certain situations, he could end up starting. It's obviously not what you're expecting here because you got Evan Ingram. You just drafted Brennan Strange. But nonetheless, we're in the 7th round. We're going to pick up the best player. And I think that is Tanner McLaughlin at this point. So that's our draft. Just going to go ahead and speed this up so it sims it all through. We can take a look at some of our picks. Not a ton of picks, right? Because we made the trade for Rome Odunze. But hey, the nice thing, we got that done. And we didn't give up any future selections to go do it. Maybe they ask for more. If they do, just being straight, get the deal done. If you got to send a little bit more, send a little bit more. But overall, you get a great wide receiver. You get your wide receiver 1 at the end of the day. I won't even say almost. I have no concern about him not living up to the bill. You get a player who is, I would almost call perfect, but you can find the little things, of course, but Odunze is about the best you're going to get, I think, in potentially the next 5 years. This is a great football player, someone who's going to be able to stretch the field for Jacksonville, to change this offense, and to help transform this team into what should be a division champion this year and should be a deep playoff contender. You also get Michael Hall Jr., who I think would be coming into a fantastic situation to be able to develop this year as a more complete defensive tackle. I think he showed a lot his last season on limited snaps. I think he showed a lot at the Senior Bowl as well. I think there's some great tools there. He's a very young player that you're bringing in. I'd be really excited about that. Then 116, I think, was the big debate for me, even if it's not for most people, because I think you could have had a very good backup quarterback for a long time. But we went with Cam Hart. I think he can start in the league. I think you can have a fair competition between him and Ronald Darby. And whoever starts, you've got a nice backup there. you have a plan and you can see in the future if you have your guy, maybe in 2025. There's a conversation definitely be had there. Now, you get Zach Zinner as well. Not a perfect scheme fit, but a very good guard. I think someone who can start at the next level. You can find a way to get him in if you have an injury. And maybe, just maybe, you're getting someone at 153 who could be a long-term solution to guard, at least, throughout that rookie deal. And you could see from that point on, his whole career is ahead of him, obviously. And then just wrap it up with the best players, right? You get your choice of kicker. You get who I think is probably the best one in this class, and then you're picking up the best player in Tanner McLachlan. He could start in the NFL if he needs to, but he's in a nice situation where you can carve out a role for him, and I think he's going to do pretty well at said role. So that's our final mock draft. Honestly, having done 500 billion of these probably over the last year, it looks a little different than what it usually turns out for me. But for the actual team, and what I would like to see, I would be very happy with this. I think the goal we talked about with Toriano before on the channel, it's to try to get 4 impact players if you can. And do we do that in this scenario? Maybe not, because you're trading away so many picks to get Rome Odunze. But I think the value of a player at that level makes up for that at the end of the day. I think you've got players who can start, players with lots of potential. That's your goal for the draft. You're trying to improve your football team the most you can, not necessarily always filling the holes. But I think we did a pretty good balance of that here. So guys, let me know what you think. We've got one more video I have planned coming out before the draft, maybe 2. We'll see. I might do a big board video just going through that. Not sure yet. Might just be something we look at, honestly, on draft night. Might be a little easier then. But we will definitely have a video on Thursday just talking about some of my final thoughts, how I think things might unfold. Just a bit of a preview for the first round. But we're pretty much here, guys. Enjoy it. Have a great week. Thanks for tuning into the channel. Make sure to hit up the live stream on Thursday night if you get time, and at least just check in when we have the draft pick come through. I'll try to give you my instant analysis on it. So thanks for joining. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And finally, go Jags.